Hi and welcome to another battle report for Age of Sigmar, although actually this is the first time I've done one since we've moved to the new channel here. So what it was 1,000 points of my Nighthaunt against, as it turned out, 1,000 points of Free People's. The person I was playing against hadn't played a game of Age of Sigmar before, so they had a lot of Empire models, so you can see there on the square bases from Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So I took my usual Nighthaunt 1,000 points one, which I've been using in most of the games, which is fairly strong enough. So for the general, Knight of Shrouds and Ethereal Steel, I've taken the Midnight Tomes. That makes him a wizard, and the spell I've taken is Soul Cage, which means that if I get that off, I can prevent an enemy unit from retreating, and they'd have to go last in the combat phase as well if I get it off. In terms of other heroes, a Guardian of Souls with Nightmare Lantern, and he's, as well as his Spectral Law and the standard spells. I've also taken Life Stealer, although when I keep thinking about it, that's a silly thing to take. I should always take Shade Mist. I don't know why I put that one down. I didn't, as it happens, ahead of the game, know what army I was coming up against. I also didn't, until we started to set it out, know that the person hadn't played before. I might have guessed, because at the gaming club, he's been there before and he's played like 40k and stuff like that. There are a lot of people playing a lot of Age of Sigmar, which is why it's 1,000-point games at the moment. But I didn't realise it was his first either. So what we did is, in terms of his army, he was basically brought a big old box of stuff. He dumped some stuff out, and I just saw green. I thought, oh, goblins. But it turned out, no, that's just the paint scheme. So I'm guessing these are Empire from Stirland. So they'd have a good relationship with the undead, really, wouldn't they? Because they're quite close to Sylvania. I was discussing this last night with someone, but I forgot to look it up. Pretty close to do. Anyway, so what they took in the end was a unit of 10 archers, 2 units of 10 handgunners, a cannon as allies, so I'll come to that in a moment, a general on mount, just 20 halberdiers and 40 spearmen. And what he was basically doing was just trying to come up with stuff that would fit into the 1,000 points. So not doing what I do and spending weeks painstakingly trying to plan an army that will all work together and all the rest of it. So I felt a bit bad about that, and I thought, okay, well, as it's going to be a stand back and shoot one, give yourself some advantage with terrain. So I said, look here, terrain, put it into a nice defensive position for yourself. But they declined to do that. So the board was relatively open. There was scenery on there, but it was relatively open. We decided not to do a battle plan because he just wanted to get into the basics of the game without having to worry about objectives. Fair enough. So it was a case of rolling to see who would start deploying first. Very sensibly, he noted that he had 7 units and I had 6 units. So either way, I was going to get to choose who would have the first turn. So he won the roll-off and he made me deploy first. Absolutely the sensible thing to do there. So I started to do that. I ended up setting half of the stuff up in reserve. We ended up like this. So I deployed my Black Coach, my Hex Wraiths, and my Knight of Shrouds, my general. And I deployed the Spirit Host, the Banshees, and my Guardian of Souls in reserve in the Underworlds, so that they could pop up during one of my movement turns. Because, at the time when... What I did is I placed a unit down. I placed the Black Coach down first, and then I placed a unit in reserve. Place a unit down, place a unit in reserve. That way I can get them to pop up wherever they're needed. The plan in this particular case was to try and attack a flank, and as you can see there, there was a flank where the halberdiers are there. The plan was to basically attack down there initially. So I elected to have my opponent take the first turn, knowing that a lot of their stuff would be out of range for shooting. The cannon, okay, could get a couple of shots off, but I couldn't remember, how a cannon would be, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't going to blow my Black Coach away in one go. So what they did is they just moved some of their missile weapons forwards a little bit. Other than that, didn't really do a lot. Fired off the cannon, which missed. It has 2 shots, I think, but unfortunately it didn't manage to land any wounds on the Black Coach, so it was a complete nonsense there. My opponent didn't have any wizards, so there was no casting of even Mystic Shields or anything like that. So it was just basically a shuffling, but other than that, and hugging around a piece of terrain, you can see there. But other than that, nothing really doing. So, and my first turn. First of all, a lot of movement here. With the black coach at the start of the battle round, because that happens in the battle round, not my turn, I'd got the black coach up to level 2. The black coach is really, for Nighthaunt, the pick of the units. You would always take a black coach, I think, if you wanted to be strong. And it rolled level 2, which allowed it to run and charge. So I rolled a 6 for the run. So with its movement of 14, basically got to move 20 inches. So voomp, straight up towards the right flank there. I got my Merman, Banshees and Guardian of Souls to pop up on the left flank there, near the halberdier, with their beady eyes on the halberdiers. Moved my general up so that he could, if necessary, apply his command point to give the Banshees an extra attack, which basically doubles their attacks, and then just move the hex wraiths up. I ran them because I wasn't going to be able to get into charge range, so I just ran them up, but I only rolled a 1 for their run, I think, so that wasn't great. And then I just made the Spirit Host pop up near the black coach, just really for support later on. The Spirit Hosts I generally take for objective capturing when it's needed. It's just generally never been needed. But I just put them up there in support in case it was needed, because at this point I didn't know how effective the shooting would be. I could see that there are effectively 30 troops, 3 units of 10 that can shoot, and then there's a cannon itself, of course. So, for all I knew, my black coach was in severe danger. So I just thought I'd have the Spirit Host to sort of, it will do some damage hopefully first, and then into there. So in terms of magic, I cast Mystic Shield on the Hex Race. There was nothing else I could realistically cast because of range in the hero phase. So then it was into charges. Now, with the charges, I managed to get the Banshees to charge into the Halberdiers. They needed at least a 9 to be able to do that. The Black Coach, I'd be able to move it so close. I would have been unlucky not to have got that charging into the Handgunners. But they both rolled... actually, the Banshees rolled a 10 plus, which meant they got a free round of combat there and then. The Black Coach did do that, and I've forgotten to note down when it did. One of its charges this game, it got to do the same thing again. It may have been here as well. I've an idea it was here as well. So, but the Banshees certainly did, so they got to do some attacks on the Halberdiers, but only with their 1 attack. The command point I can use to increase their attacks by 1 is used in the combat phase, so that couldn't be used yet. The Black Coach, of course, mullered the Handgunners. It has a lot of attacks. With its full suite of attacks, and because it's not taking any real damage, it's got to take 3 wounds before you affect any of its attacks at all. And even then, it's not by a great deal. So it has 3 attacks on the part of the driver, the Cairn Wraith, who was actually useless up until one point later on in the game. Absolutely useless, couldn't hit for toffee. But he had 3 attacks, and there's Soul Reach Grasp, which is a 4th attack. Then there's 9 attacks from the Spectral Host, that's 13, and then 8 from the Steed, so that's 21 attacks altogether. Of varying quality, but when 21 attacks, it's a lot. So yeah, that basically, so in the charge phase, I basically wiped out the handgun, I think. The Halberdiers did a decent amount of damage to it. Then in the combat phase, when I was able to double the attacks of the Banshees, then that finished off the Halberdiers. The Guardian of Souls in range to be able to give them the +1 to wound as well. So although they were only hitting on 4s, the Banshees, we've got 2 attacks, wounding on 2s, -2 rend, and then D3 wounds each. They are my assassins in chief, my Mermon Banshees. Especially if I can get that command ability off. They are absolutely my assassins in chief. Then, when it came to the second battle round, rolled for the Black Coach, went up to level 4 at this point. So, it had an awful lot of abilities now. Could retreat and charge, all the rest of it. It meant that when I charged into something, I would be doing... on a 2+, I could do D3 mortal wounds to it. Although both times I charged after this point, I completely forgot to do that. But the bottom line was in Battle Round 2 as well, we rolled off. And because I allowed my opponent to go first, they would have won ties, but I rolled higher. So I got to choose, and I decided to go first, of course. I think in the first turn, if your opponent can't do anything dangerous, then allow your opponent to go first, because then you give yourself the chance of the double turn, which is what I did. But after that, you probably do want to go first to press your advantage. So that's what I did. So in terms of movement, I got my Banshees to set their beady eyes on the cannon, but in such a way that they'll be able to charge the cannon and still get some into combat with the handgunners. I really didn't believe I was going to need all my Banshees to beat up the cannon. The Hex Wraith advanced forward, the General advanced forward. The Guardian of Souls just ran up. He wasn't intended to get into combat with anything, so I was quite happy to run him up just to try and stay within range of things, so that, you know, because for him to give the +1 to wound, the unit has to be wholly within 12 inches of him. It's no good a few models within 12 inches. It's the whole unit has to be within 12 inches. So keeping him is there as much as possible. With the Black Coach, I decided to zip it right across because it can fly. You know, it can run and charge now. So I decided to fly it right across the archers and set towards the spearmen. I thought, well, this is, you know, this is the thing that's going to take on those spearmen. I mean, I could have just gone straight forward and through the rest of it. But then the spearman will be charging into me. Not that that would make a huge amount of difference. I just thought, let's take the advantage, because if I can charge, I have the 2+ chance to do D3 mortal wounds. It's just that I then forgot. The Spirit House I didn't really do anything with. I just left them there, I think. And then, you know, charged in with the Banshees such that they were effectively charging the cannon and the handgunners. Hex Race into the handgunners. The Hex Race had lost like 1 or 2 models at this point. And the Black Coach is the spearman, and then completely forgot about the mortal wounds. Didn't do that at all. So, what I did at this point in terms of deciding on the combat, I thought to myself, look, the spearmen are not going to kill my Black Coach. So I thought there's no point in having my Black Coach go first. So I actually had the Hex Wraith go first, because they'd already lost 1 or 2 models here. I'd been able to raise 1 back. But, you know, I'd still had 1 lost. So I thought, well, you know, the handgunners could actually kill some Hex Race. So, whereas the spearmen at worst could maybe lose me 1 attack on the Black Coach. So Hex Race first. And then they, you know, attacked. And eventually with the Black Coach, did a reasonable amount of damage to the spearmen. It wasn't a fantastic amount, but it's a large unit. So it's always going to be a war of attrition in that particular case. Took out the cannon completely. Didn't completely take out the handgunners. You know, they stood firm, but, you know, a few of them nonetheless failed there. Then when it came to the Free People's turn, moved the General around with the intention of attacking the Black Coach. Other than that, didn't really do a lot in terms of movement. So with the chargers, sort of, you know, piled in with the Spearmen to get more into combat around the Black Coach, charged the General in. I mean, in terms of my Black Coach moving to where it did, one other thing just to point out here, it did mean I couldn't use my Black Coach's ability to raise D3 slain models in a friendly unit, because I could have done with that on the Hex Race. They were looking quite dodgy at certain points. My General had the same ability, but if 2 of them, it's like 2 D3 slain models could be brought back then. That way I could keep them fresh, but never mind. So the General attacks there. And then the Cairn Wraith actually woke up. Came to life. It wasn't able to do any damage to bog standard grunt. All of a sudden, General hones into view, and it rolled me thing. 2 6s on the hits. That's automatically 4 mortal wounds on the General. And then the next attack, the Soul Reach Grasp, which I think is also a Cairn Wraith basically attack, finished the General off. So the rest of the attacks into the Spearman. It was absolute madness, this Cairn Wraith. You're obviously one of those, it's like a sports team, an elite sports team that plays very badly against poor quality opposition and sometimes loses because they're not really up for the game. But against the big boys, oh, they're up for it now. They're going to show their best stuff. Cairn Wraith was like that. He says, I'm not messing about with these peasants. You show me someone worthy of my skills. Oh, their General. Yes, I'll kill him. Anyway. At this point as well, of course, you know, I managed to deal with the handgunners, and then battle round 3 came around, and I got my 5th level on the Black Coach, and then I also won to decide who goes first in the 3rd battle round. Feeling quite bad at this point. And so I elected to go first again. So, you know, my Merman Banshees, although it's not clear when I do the diagrams like this because I'm not showing the models that are lost, the Merman Banshees had moved out of combat with the handgunners it had killed. So it was free to fly off elsewhere. So I flew off behind the archers, maintaining the 3-inch, in excess of 3-inch gap with the handgunners and the spearmen. It was a little bit tight. They had to sort of stack a little bit backwards, really. Moved the Guardian Swords as far as I could, but it wasn't very far. I couldn't move it very far at all. So it was going to be out of range for the Merman Banshees at any rate. And then advanced with the Spirit Host and my general around it to basically surround the archers and smash the archers. So charged in. Obviously, the Spirit Hosts actually were quite disappointed. I mean, they're not great, you know. They've got a lot of attacks. I could only get 2 of them into base contacts just because there was some scenery around there that's, again, not clear on that. And they got 6, so it was 12 attacks, but hitting on 5s. Although any automatic 6s would be a mortal wound. And then wounding on, like... I can't remember what they wound on now. 4s, I think. But nonetheless, the combined might of all these things. I was given my Knight of Shrouds to use his command ability, actually, to increase the number of attacks of the Hex Race at this point, not the Banshees, because the Banshees weren't taking on anything that would be a serious block to them anyway. So polished off the archers, polished off the handgunners, whittled down the spearmen, really. At which point, by the end of this, my opponent conceded, of course, because at this point, there's nothing really left. There's a grand total, because there's wounds caused. There were wounds caused at various points on my Black Coach, and there were Hex Wraiths killed, but I was able to replenish wounds and you know, bring models back to the point where at the end of the game, I had lost a grand total of 2 Hex Wraiths out of everything, and my opponent had lost everything apart from some spearmen who were obviously not going to stand against the combined might of my entire army there. So just in terms of so many little sort of learning points there. In terms of the way I did it, I think that was probably correct. It's like I always say, try and attack a weak point there. The thing is, with this particular army, I think the downside is my opponent had elected to take the Free People's Allegiance, which, as we were sort of discussing at the end, I thought, well, I asked him why he did that, and he said it was because they get a battle trait, which means they can re-roll failed battle shot tests. The problem with that is you're not really getting any benefit out of it. He'd have been better off with Order Allegiance, I think. Because re-rolling a failed battle shot test, so in terms of the battle shot test they would have to take without the general there, they've got Bravery 5 by default. Anywhere near a Nighthaunt unit and you've got Bravery 4, your Bravery's gone down. If I cause a significant amount of damage, which is very likely because, you know, there were a lot of models there. There were what, 40 spearmen, that's 60, 90 troops, plus the wounds of the general and the cannon together. Probably another 9 or 10 wounds there as well. So it's about 100 wounds worth of stuff. Mine's nowhere near that many wounds, but mine is much more difficult to kill. You know, Nighthaunt have a 4+ unmodifiable save. Deathless minions if they stay within range of the general, which the Black Coach didn't do there, but it's got enough wounds to look after itself. And, you know, it can fly, got very high mobility, all the rest of it. So it's not easy to kill. Whereas the Free People's, each individual model doesn't cost very much. It's like 8 points or something. And they're much easier to kill. Rend will work against them for a start. And as I say, also my units are very unlikely to have to take battle shock tests for the simple reason that it's Bravery 10. To cause enough damage for me to have to take a battle shock test, because I don't have larger units either, you'd basically have to wipe out the unit before I even have to take a battle shot test, at which point there's no battle shot test. So, in theory, you could make my Banshees make a battle shock test, but I think that's the only unit in the army that would ever have to take a battle shock test. Whereas for those, they're going to have to take it, and they're going to have to take it with huge negative. So, re-rolling it wouldn't necessarily help. In fact, one time when he re-rolled, it made a worse roll. So it made it even worse. So I wouldn't have taken that at all. I would have taken just Order Allegiance and then brought... I don't know what else he had, though. But I would have thought in terms of more artillery. He took the artillery, he did, the cannon, as allies, which unfortunately didn't do anything, but it was on its own. Like, to rely upon one piece on its own isn't likely to work. Like, I keep thinking with the Nurgle army of bringing a Plague Claw, this Clan Pestilence thing, because a couple of advantages to that. One, it will always be in my own territory, so getting me contagion points. And the other thing, it can fire pot shots. But if I just have one, it's only got one attack. It's probably not going to do much on any given turn. Whereas if you had a battery of them, of course that would ramp up the price. But if you had a battery of them, you've got a reasonable expectation of doing some significant damage with it, like targeting a given unit. And the same sort of thing. If you had a battery of artillery all pointing at my black coats, that would be quite worrying. And it's not like any of the blocks of units really held anyway. The spearmen did, because there were 40 of them. None of the handgunners, actually, to be fair, did, but it's because I didn't really go into them with loads of stuff. But I went in with enough stuff. They held up. The halberdiers didn't last at all. They didn't even, I don't think they even got to attack. All right, granted, that was partly to do with the Nighthaunt rule. And again, this is nothing, we were discussing this as well, and someone was saying, well, because Nighthaunt, of course, the latest army, well, it's not quite the latest army now, but one of the latest armies, so it's got very powerful rules. I don't think it is that when I read some of the others, because there's other ones with very powerful rules as well. Like Blades of Corn got very powerful rules. Ideneth Deepkin, Daughters of Cain, Maggotkin of Nurgle, which are, all older than Nighthaunt. I think it's really to do with the fact the ones who've got a proper battle tome are strong because they've got battle traits and other rules. I mean, this guy, even if he'd have brought a wizard along, if he'd have gone Allegiance Order and brought a wizard along, he'd have had limited access to spells. Whereas those who've got their own battle tome also have some good, like a proper battle tome, a modern one that is built more in mind with matched play than the very early ones, for which free peoples don't even have that. They've got there's just the stuff in the Order Allegiance stuff book and the General's Handbook. So I think the concept of the arm itself, you have to go Allegiance Order with it. It's like when I tried to make the Clan Pestilence army from the Battle Tome, it was always going to be very limited. I mean, you could do it, but it's going to be very limited. What you're far better off doing is just going, okay, let's just make a proper Skaven army and having to use the Chaos Allegiance. It's just, I wouldn't like doing that. Which is why I'm not going to do it until a proper battle tome comes out. So I think that was the same thing here. If the person that was playing was perfectly sensible in terms of what he was doing with his resources, it's just, it wasn't an effective army. I think that's what it came down to. It was just not going to be effective. But anyway, there we go. That's up to that one. Should be another battle report next week because I do have another game scheduled, I think, as well. So hopefully I'll get enough games that I can pop these out at least every couple of weeks. I think it might be. There's not enough, as I say, there's not enough people as gung-ho about the playing of the game as I. Obviously, they enjoy doing it, but more of them are more into painting as well as doing other games as well. I'm the only one there who is all about the playing of it and all about the Age of Sigmar. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But I have hopes that that every couple of weeks, at least twice a month, I'll be able to do something like this. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, don't forget to click the like button if you enjoyed it and subscribe for further content. Comments down below, of course. And until next time, I'll see you later.